Okay, so the news on September 10th, 2025, it was truly unsettling. Charlie Kirk,
Hmm.
a figure who had, well, undeniably made his mark, often with quite a bit of controversy, assassinated during his Prove Me Wrong campus tour, Utah Valley University.
Yeah, it's hard to picture, isn't it? An outdoor debate, apparently a question about mass shootings.
Right, hanging in the air, and then
Right.
just a single shot from a distance.
A really tragic sudden end to a very, very public life.
And this event, it immediately threw a spotlight on so many intertwined issues, didn't it? Far beyond just, one individual.
Absolutely. It really felt like a moment that demanded a closer look, a deep dive.
What's particularly striking, I think, is how this awful event just instantly became this national flashpoint.
Yeah, it really did. Reigniting debates about political rhetoric, the boundaries of free speech.
And its consequences, right? Plus the platforms, the digital spaces where these really intense ideas get thrown around constantly.
Exactly. It touched on everything.
And that's precisely what we want to unpack for you here. Our mission with this deep dive is, well, to try and understand Charlie Kirk.
Mm.
The person, the organization he built, Turning Point USA, the controversies that always seem to be swirling around him.
And of course, the chilling details surrounding his death.
But more than that, we need to connect his story to the bigger picture. The landscape of political discourse in America today.
The spread of information and, let's be frank, misinformation, especially in our digital world, podcasts included.
Faithfully podcasts. And this alarming rise of political violence that, well, we're all witnessing.
We've gathered quite a stack of sources trying to get both that close-up view and the wider angle on what is an incredibly complex situation.
So let's start with who Charlie Kirk actually was. He was a bit of a phenomenon, wasn't he?
He really was. Very young, telegenic.
Hmm.
Co-founded Turning Point USA, TPUSA, back in 2012. He was just 18.
18, that's incredible. And he quickly got labeled, a conservative boy wonder, a face of the whole Make America Great Again movement.
His rise was just incredibly fast, and it seemed very deliberate. Born in Illinois in 1993.
Did a bit of community college, I read.
Yeah, briefly.
Hmm.
But dropped out pretty quickly to focus completely on TPUSA. He apparently applied to West Point, didn't get in.
Huh. I heard he sometimes joked about not having a degree during debates.
Right, kind of played into that outsider image. And TPUSA's growth, just explosive. Sources show revenue hitting $28 million.
$28 million.
Yeah, a seven-fold increase in just 4 years. They were claiming a presence on over 2,000 campuses, hundreds of employees.
Plus the affiliated groups, Turning Point Action, Turning Point Faith.
Exactly. It became a real machine.
And he wasn't just building an organization, was he? He was building serious political connections, too.
Oh, absolutely. A key ally of Donald Trump. Very close ties with Trump Jr., often at the White House, Mar-a-Lago.
Our sources mentioned he advised on vetting people for positions.
Yeah, and campaigned hard for Trump. Famously, he arranged something like 80 buses of Patriots to D.C. for January 6, 2021.
Wow. And then there's the media side. Huge presence.
It's massive. Daily talk radio show, the Charlie Kirk Show podcast, which became huge, millions of followers on social media.
And those Prove Me Wrong debates on campuses, they were designed for viral clips, weren't they?
Totally. Engage opponents, create content, get shared. It was a very modern strategy.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Kirk's rapid ascent really reflects a significant shift, wouldn't you say, in conservative activism?
I think so. Particularly in reaching younger people and just mastering these new media platforms. He really, really understood how to build a brand in the digital age.
But, okay, as we dug into the sources, it wasn't just the rapid rise that jumped out. It was the questions around TPUSA's finances.
That got complicated.
What did the sources, like ProPublica's investigation, what did they find there?
Well, ProPublica reported accusations that TPUSA made some, let's say, misleading assertions about its finances to regulators, state and federal.
Okay.
Charities usually need independent audits for fundraising in many states. But the investigation highlighted what they called significant ties between TPUSA's accounting firm, Stapleton Group, and its co-founder and former treasurer, Bill Montgomery.
Significant ties, like?
Well, like Montgomery being a business development advisor for Stapleton. The firm's managing partner was apparently Montgomery's personal tax preparer.
Okay. That does sound pretty intertwined.
Yeah, and there were even questions about the firm's actual license being expired for a period, though the managing partner's personal CPA license was active. They said they were fixing it.
And it wasn't just the auditors, right? There were payments going to businesses owned by insiders.
Exactly. That was another major point. Sources detail hundreds of thousands going to Montgomery's own printing shop, for example.
On top of his salary.
On top of his direct income from TPUSA, yeah, and payments for office space rental to him. Similar things noted with the current treasurer, Tom Sadeka's payroll firm.
How did TPUSA respond to that?
Their attorneys and spokespeople defended these arrangements, said they provided compelling operational benefit and were in full compliance with TPUSA's IRS-compliant conflict of interest policy.
But it still raises questions, doesn't it, about transparency, accountability?
It inevitably does. When financial relationships get that tangled up in a nonprofit, it leads people to ask if funds are truly being used solely for the stated mission. That independence question is key.
So we've seen the organization building the financial questions, but that growth, it was fueled by his politics, right? Which were, well, provocative is putting it mildly.
Definitely. He generated intense loyalty on one side and fierce condemnation on the other. He didn't just encounter controversy, he often seemed to actively court it.
Yeah, leaned right into it. Let's maybe unpack some of those key positions, how they shaped who he was in the public eye.
Okay, so take election integrity and the pandemic response. He was a huge voice promoting those false and disproven claims of fraud after the 2020 election.
Leading Stop the Steal protests?
Right, sending those buses to D.C. for January 6th. He later pleaded the Fifth before the House Select Committee investigating it.
And on COVID.
Lots of misinformation there, too, calling it the China virus, pushing back against vaccines, promoting unproven treatments like hydroxychloroquine.
He cited sources sometimes, though, right?
Sometimes, yeah, but often non-peer-reviewed preprints, basically. Research that hasn't gone through the standard scientific vetting process yet. He also pushed conspiracy theories, like COVID being a CCP plot against Trump.
Okay. And then the social and cultural issues. Often really stark positions. Gun rights, for instance.
A staunch advocate.
Yeah.
After the Parkland shooting, he spoke for the NRA, and then there was that quote from April 2023.
The one about gun deaths being worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. That quote obviously resurfaced after his death.
And on abortion.
He called it murder.
Yeah.
Believed it should be illegal, opposed exceptions for rape. He even compared it to the Holocaust, saying it was worse.
Wow. What about LGBTQ plus rights? That seemed to shift over time.
It did. Earlier on, maybe around 2018, sources described him as more relatively secular liberal on some social issues. Then he shifted.
Saying marriage is one man, one woman, but gay people should be welcome.
That was around 2019. But later, he was criticizing the Obergefell Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage, calling LGBTQ activists the alphabet mafia.
Claiming they want to corrupt your children.
Right. And he got flack for saying it should be legal to burn rainbow or Black Lives Matter flags. Very inflammatory stuff.
He also took on civil rights history, didn't he? Calling white privilege a racist lie.
Served on Trump's 1776 commission, which aimed for a more patriotic education. Made claims about democratic immigration policies aiming to decrease white demographics.
There were some really shocking statements about race, like alleging prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people.
Yeah, deeply controversial. And he called the Civil Rights Act of 1964 a huge mistake, an anti-white weapon. Even described Martin Luther King Jr. as awful.
These kinds of statements often delivered in that very confrontational, destroying adversaries style.
They definitely cemented his high profile, his status as a real lightning rod. He also faced accusations of anti-Semitism from groups like the ADL.
For claims about Jewish donors funding radical policies.
Exactly. Though some Jewish figures defended him, pointing to his pro-Israel stance. It was complex.
And then there was the growing embrace of Christian nationalism.
Increasingly, yeah. Beliefs like women should submit to husbands, advocating Christian creationism, saying evolution is false.
And climate change. Denied it, then retracted, then called activism a Trojan horse for Marxism.
Pretty much sums it up. He was all over the map on some issues, but consistently provocative.
So this huge range of really controversial statements, it shows how individuals can become these powerful amplifiers for certain narratives, right? Especially using platforms with direct, maybe unmoderated communication.
Absolutely. Which leads us right into the next crucial piece. The role of the media landscape itself, particularly platforms like podcasts.
Yeah, what does this all mean for how information spreads or misinforms?
Well, it's a huge question. And the data we looked at, particularly at Brookings' report, paints a really clear picture of podcasting's influence.
There's that perception, isn't there? The say whatever you want idea. Ted Cruz's co-host even said it outright.
Michael Knowles, yeah. It's a podcast. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that perception, combined with convenience, has fueled incredible growth.
What are the numbers?
Something like 41% of Americans listening monthly. Nearly 1 in 4 looking to podcasts for actual news. Huge global audience projected, over 500 million. U.S. ad revenue expected to double to $4 billion.
Yeah, okay, so massive reach. But what about the content, the accuracy?
That's where the concern comes in. The Brookings report found that the spread of unsubstantiated or just false claims is, well, common.
Common how?
Nearly 70% of the political podcasters they studied shared at least one such claim. It showed up in at least 1 out of every 20 episodes, on average.
Wow. Any specific examples stand out?
Election fraud claims after 2020. They spiked 600% after Election Day. Made up over a quarter of the episodes they looked at between the election and January 6th.
Driven by?
Mostly conservative shows, yeah.
Right.
Steve Bannon's War Room was a huge driver. Something like 80% of his post-election content featured those claims. And they were really durable, these claims, even after being thrown out of court repeatedly.
And COVID misinformation, was that prevalent too?
Definitely. Appeared in about 1 in 8 episodes during the pandemic, mostly focusing on unproven treatments or preventions.
Not the wilder stuff like microchips necessarily?
Mostly not, according to this report. It was more often rooted in misunderstandings of science, confusion over guidelines, maybe relying on those non-peer-reviewed studies we mentioned.
But there were conspiracy theories.
The most common one found was the idea of COVID being a Chinese Communist Party plot against Trump. And again, Bannon's podcast accounted for about 3/4 of that specific claim.
What's really striking, though, is the concentration. You said just a few podcasters were responsible for most of it.
Yeah, the report identified 10 prominent podcasters, mostly conservative-leaning, responsible for over 60% of all the unsubstantiated or false claims identified.
And their combined reach.
Over 28 million followers just on Facebook and Twitter, not even counting podcast listeners directly.
Yeah.
It shows how influence can really concentrate.
So does this stuff actually sway listeners, or do people see through it?
The results there were kind of mixed. One analysis method, looking at the sentiment in listener reviews, did find a correlation. More false claims seemed to lead to more negative reviews.
But standard ratings?
Yeah.
Like 1 to 5 stars?
Less conclusive, apparently. And moderating this is a huge challenge, right? Podcasts are hosted everywhere. The big apps like Spotify, Apple, Google, they tend to act more like libraries or impartial stewards than direct hosts who control the content.
Makes uniform rules really difficult.
Incredibly difficult. So this really highlights the critical role podcasts now play. They're a major channel for information, yes, but also for misinformation. And that decentralized, say-anything ethos makes understanding, let alone regulating, the full impact incredibly complex.
With potentially very serious real-world implications.
Exactly. Which brings us, tragically, back to the event itself, Charlie Kirk's assassination, and how it's forced this national conversation about political violence.
So the details of the incident itself, September 10th, 2025, UVU campus, shot in the neck during the Prove Me Wrong event.
Yeah, died later at Timpanogos Regional Hospital. Witnesses reported hearing just one loud gunshot.
And the investigation, where does that stand?
Authorities believe the shot came from the Lucy Center building, maybe 200, 300 yards away. The suspect apparently jumped off the building to flee.
They have leads.
Security footage tracked movements. They found palm prints, a Converse shoe print. A gun was recovered nearby. There's a manhunt. FBI offered a $100,000 reward. The description is pretty vague, college age, maybe someone familiar with the campus layout.
And security at the event. Was it adequate?
Well, there were UVU police, uniformed in plainclothes. Plus, Kirk had his own security team, 6 officers from UVU.
Yeah.
But sources noted there were no reported bag scans or equipment checks for the crowd. That detail has definitely drawn some scrutiny since.
Understandably. And the political reaction was just immediate, wasn't it? And intense.
Very intense and varied. You had broad condemnation of the violence itself. Utah Governor Spencer Cox called it a political assassination, a dark day, pleading for unity.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, too, saying political violence violates the core principles of our country.
Right. And former presidents Trump, Obama, Biden, Clinton, George W. Bush all issued statements condemning violence.
But then Trump's specific reaction went further, didn't it?
It did. He explicitly blamed the radical left for the assassination and other political violence, saying their rhetoric was directly responsible for the terrorism.
And he vowed action.
Yeah, vowed his administration would find those who contributed to this atrocity, including organizations funding them. He ordered flags at half-staff.
But not everyone focused solely on condemning the violence itself. There were other angles, other reactions.
No, it got complicated quickly. You had commentators like Charlemagne Tygod bringing up Kirk's own past statements.
Connecting it to the gun deaths are worth it, quote.
Exactly. Noting that, a gun wouldn't have saved Kirk from a sniper shot from that distance. That sparked debate.
And some people lost their jobs over comments made in the aftermath.
Yeah, Matthew Dowd, for example, was reportedly fired for making comments deemed inappropriate about Kirk's rhetoric right after the shooting.
And then the flip side is this sort of cancel culture accusation from the right.
Right. Figures like Laura Loomer, Chaya Raichik were actively trying to identify and sort of expose people online who were criticizing Kirk or perceived as celebrating his death.
Which led to real consequences for some of those people. Job losses, even death threats.
Reportedly, yes. It became very ugly, very fast.
And this incident, it seems to crystallize a wider, really chilling trend. Speaker Johnson mentioned the number of threats against public figures.
Yeah, around 14,000 recorded by Capitol Police just this year, up significantly from 9,000 last year. That's a huge jump.
The Pentagon moved its 9/11 ceremony indoors, partly because of this.
Out of an abundance of caution, yes. And Senator John Curtis saying he'd think twice now about holding major public events. It sends a real chill through the political world. It really illustrates this dangerous feedback loop, doesn't it? You have the heightened rhetoric, the spread of polarizing claims online, and then the tragic real-world horror of political violence.
It forces everyone to confront that line, or maybe the lack of one, between free expression and actually inciting harm, especially when you have powerful voices involved.
Absolutely. And despite all the controversies, Kirk's legacy is also being shaped now. He was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Trump.
He was on Forbes 30 Under 30 back in 2018, got an honorary doctorate from Liberty University.
Right. And many young conservatives described him as a mentor, an inspiration, admired his boldness, his willingness to engage in debate, even if controversially.
What a truly complex and somber deep dive this has turned out to be. Charlie Kirk's life covered this incredible arc.
From that young activist building a really formidable youth movement
to this hugely influential, yet just deeply controversial figure in American politics and media, his impact, his methods, the ethical questions.
All culminating in this shocking assassination.
It just shows, doesn't it, how deeply tangled political talk, media platforms, and just societal well-being have become.
It really does. And the challenge now isn't just about spotting misinformation, though that's part of it. It's about fostering an environment where, strong debate doesn't spiral into violence.
Where the consequences of our words, whatever platform we're using, are actually understood.
By everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
The tech companies, the regulators, the hosts, and especially you, the listener. We all play a role.
That is a critical point to end on. So for you, listening right now, think about Charlie Kirk's own famous prove me wrong style, his approach to debate. And consider his statement that some gun deaths are a necessary cost for the Second Amendment. Now, if political rhetoric itself can fuel an atmosphere where violence becomes more likely, how do you draw that line? Where does provocative speech end and responsible discourse begin in a society that feels increasingly fragmented by information and now tragically scarred by political violence? Something to really think about.